Thank you very much for joining us today for the BEEc Speaker Series for March. The BEE Speaker Series is our international webinar that is organized by BEEc. So for those who may not know, BEEc is the Center for Bee Ecology, Evolution, and Conservation at York University. We are an organized research unit, and if you'd like to learn more about us, you can visit our website, www.yorku.ca/bees, or you can email me, the BC coordinator at bc@yorku.ca. We are an initiative that strives to advance research in the fields of bee ecology, evolution, and conservation. The mission of BC is to foster interdisciplinary, innovative, collaborative, and cutting-edge research in order to advance our knowledge on bees and implement policy changes to help sustain pollinators globally. Our goal is to apply our collaborative efforts to the development of policies and environmental management for the long-term sustainability of bees and the vital ecosystem services they provide. If you would like to hear more about BC, you can feel free to join our listserv by sending an email to listserv@yorku.ca with the command in the body of the email stating subscribe bees, as well as your first name and last name, and you'll be added to the list. You'll be notified of any upcoming programming, receive a monthly newsletter, as well as reminders of events such as the BEEc Speaker Series like the one today. Also, if you are a York university researcher or collaborator, feel free to contact me for more information about applying to be an associate. Our associates are interdisciplinary researchers and community members that are involved with pushing the limits in bee research, education, public outreach, and policy. And you can see here with the pictures at the bottom here, a small selection of our BEEc associates. So today you have joined our BEEc Speaker Series program. We run this program once a month, typically the second or third Friday of the month at 11 a.m. EST using the Zoom platform. We've already had a great selection of speakers starting in the fall, as well as continuing the winter, and many of these talks are available for viewing on our website as well. So feel free to visit www.yorku.ca/bees and then /speaker series to learn more about this program and also to register for any upcoming talks for the following months. Just a few logistics for today. We are using the Zoom platform and only panelists can turn their camera and microphones on. We ask that you please use the Q&A box to pose any questions that you may have for the speaker, and then we will pose the questions back to the speaker at the end of the talk. Do use the chat box sparingly for any general comments, as it can be kind of distracting for the speaker to continuously have notifications popping up. And then if you are experiencing any issues, you can send a private message to myself at bc@yorku.ca. As well, if you need to leave at the hour mark, so this talk will end at 12, we are still in the Q&A discussion that might carry over just a little bit. Do not worry, this presentation as well as the Q&A session will be recorded and it will be posted at a later date after the contents of the talk are published. The talks are also posted on YouTube at youtube.com/@beesyork. We have several previous talks already available on the YouTube channel to view. We also have talks posted from other programs like the BEEc Associate Series, as well as BEEcon, our annual conference. We invite you to subscribe to our channel so you'll be notified when the next video is posted. And before we get started today, I would like to recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. It is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. And if you would like to learn more or know more about the history of land that you come from or where you are joining us from today, this website is a fantastic resource for this exploration. It is a Canadian initiative, but it now has worldwide coverage. And with that, I would like to invite Dr. Gordon Fitch to please introduce our guest speaker for today.
Great, thanks, Catherine, for that introduction. So I'm thrilled to get to introduce Dr. Monika Egerer. Monika is coming to us from the School of Life Sciences at the Technical University of Munich in Germany, where she's a professor and leads the Urban Productive Ecosystems Lab. Monika is originally from Southeast Michigan in the US, and she studied biology at Kalamazoo College as an undergrad, where she developed a strong interest in ecology, conservation, agriculture, and the environment. She went on to receive a PhD in environmental studies at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she studied urban community gardens from a socio-ecological perspective, focusing on the ecosystem services provided by arthropods. I'll just say, not just bees. She also is interested in natural enemies and other things, but we won't hold that against her. And today she's going to be telling us about perhaps some of that work and then her more recent work over in Germany, looking at how urban community gardens can support wild pollinators from research to practice. Thanks, Monika.
Okay, thank you so much, Gordon, for the introduction, and also Catherine for the introduction to the seminar series. And I'm very excited to be here and to present our work currently in Munich and in Berlin. So now I've jumped across the ocean from the Midwest to Germany, where, like Gordon said, I lead the research group Urban Productive Ecosystems at the Technical University of Munich. So today I will give a short overview over some of the research that we're doing. And I'm not just a bee person, so I will also point that out. We have a very diverse and interdisciplinary research group here in Munich. If you are interested in urban ecology and urban agroecosystems or agroecosystems generally, we are coming at them from diverse perspectives, from ecological, entomology, or sociology perspectives. So really, we are yes, scientists, but also very working across boundaries to engage with stakeholders as well, which is why I also really like the mission of the institute and of the seminar series. So I don't have to say much to get started today. Is that we know that biodiversity is declining globally, and especially in pollinators and insect pollinators. So whether it is pesticide exposure or disease and parasites or farming practices, insect pollinators are facing decline. And this has implications for pollination as an ecosystem service. So many of these agricultural crops, but also wild plants, rely on insect pollinators. And so probably speaking to the crowd that already knows this, but maybe one thing that we don't necessarily always consider is the role of cities for supporting pollinators. So as we lose habitat in our landscape, we can ask, okay, can cities also provide habitat for biodiversity, including insect pollinators? And what is the role of green spaces, or what we may call urban green infrastructure, or new nature for supporting insect pollinators? And so we can say that, yes, there are certain factors around cities and around urbanization processes that are leading to pollinator and biodiversity broadly decline. So whether this is imperviousness and the loss of habitat, like this bee here that is sitting on a concrete slab, but we can see opportunities for biodiversity conservation and also engaging people in conservation, especially as a majority of our world's population lives in cities today. So we don't necessarily know too much about how such habitats in cities can support pollinators and what may be specific factors of these habitats that are important for supporting a diversity of pollinators. And so one I think increasing research focus, but also policy focus is to understand the drivers of urban biodiversity, as well as what kind of policies or plans can we put in place to support urban biodiversity. And this is one of the main foci of the Bundesamt für Naturschutz in Germany, which is the agency of nature conservation. They have a urban nature conservation program that wants to ask, okay, how can we support biodiversity in our city neighborhoods? Where are opportunities and where are challenges? And so I like this picture that we've taken in a garden that we work in, where yeah, gardeners have installed a wild bee conservation area within their gardens. And so there are certain opportunities. People are getting interested in conservation within their own backyard, but how can we mainstream this, and what may be limitations or challenges? And so when we think about people as really change agents of urban landscapes, whether we're thinking about yeah private green spaces but also public green spaces, we want to ask also how can we engage people in the city in meaningful ways to get involved in conservation efforts. And so there's many new and emerging participatory and transdisciplinary research approaches, whether it's mapping exercises, whether it's using citizen science with apps and certain programs, or whether it's really old-fashioned and just conducting workshops. These are all ways in which we can systematically engage with residents. And one way that we're starting to do this in a ecosystem that we are very interested in our research group, and yeah, that I gained interested in when I was doing my PhD in California, are community gardens. And so, community gardens are yeah a place where we can yeah see potentially high biodiversity of managed plants, but also spontaneous vegetation. We also can see a diversity of animals associated with these plants and with these ecosystems. And we see that alongside horticultural production of food and flowers, that gardens can be supporting biodiversity. And also, gardens can provide what we call a living laboratory to co-create and test and collectively implement biodiversity conservation strategies with the gardeners. And one idea is that we can then mainstream such initiatives if we're conducting such yeah experiments for biodiversity conservation within these gardens and evaluating them. They could be potential to scale out or be mainstreamed across other urban ecosystems. And so this is important because although many gardeners are already conducting biodiversity friendly gardening and doing things for animals that use their gardens, we don't necessarily know systematically how biodiversity friendly gardening strategies are supporting biodiversity and how this can be then mainstreamed. So one idea is to then use gardens as a laboratory where we can test in a controlled area with a set group of people different biodiversity interventions that then can be brought into a city neighborhood surrounding them. And so this is the idea of like this multi-zone gardens where you have food gardens combined with measures to promote biodiversity. And so we can think about, yeah, moving from the garden to other areas of the neighborhood, whether this is churches or schools or businesses, etc. And we can implement certain biodiversity interventions and potentially evaluate them and based on successes or challenges, scale them up and move across the city landscape. And so this idea forms the foundation for our work in Munich as well as in Berlin. So we want to increase biodiversity in community gardens and neighborhoods based on evidence-based research. And here we use urban pollinators and especially bees as our focus organism. We want to also elevate the participation and education of neighborhood residents and support them in biodiversity interventions. And we also want to anchor our work and our research in these citywide initiatives. So Munich currently has this biodiversity strategy that they are seeking to work across different neighborhoods, across different stakeholder groups to support biodiversity initiatives or biodiversity conservation initiatives in the city. So I'll just like lay out a couple of dimensions of our work in Munich and in Berlin. And the first is simply, asking a couple of basic research questions. So first is what is the biodiversity of plants and pollinating insects in urban community gardens? Which features at the garden level and landscape level can promote plant and insect pollinator biodiversity and associated ecosystem services such as pollination? And if we find that there are certain factors that correlate with plant and insect pollinator biodiversity and ecosystem services, can we implement them to promote biodiversity in subsequent years? And does this actually have an impact on biodiversity? So we know that urban habit or that pollinators need certain things to survive and thrive in a habitat. And so when we think about city habitats and we want to support pollinators, we need, yeah, floral resources and we also need nesting resources. So this may include not just flowers, but also deadwood or open soil or sandy areas or dry stone walls and cavities, etc. And when we look at a garden, we can say, okay, what may be then specifically important for supporting pollinators? Is it flower diversity? Is it the trees and shrubs? Is it the certain ground cover characteristics? Or is it the landscape? And this is really the driving factor of pollinator communities. And so we're trying to understand, okay, how do all these factors, influence our pollinators and particularly wild bees? And to get a gradient in these different management practices, we have a network of urban garden research sites in Munich as well as in Berlin. And so we started this research in 2020, and we have been now expanding to two cities since 2021. And so this is I think we're going into our fourth or fifth year in these gardens, and it's really exciting to see how our research is building each year on the last. And so what we do in these gardens is that we want to have a gradient of urbanization. So we select the sites so that they vary along an urbanization gradient. So some are more on the outskirts of the city and surrounded by more natural land, where others are very, middle in the city and have a lot of building and sealed surface surrounding them. And so we can look at the radius surrounding the garden here. And within each site, we establish a 20 by 20 meter research plot because the gardens are all different in their sizes. And so about every 6 weeks from April to October, we go to the gardens and we do observations of what are flower visitors. We also are here then documenting which bee species because we're very interested in the bees. We set up pan traps to also document to supplement the active observations. And then we document the plant diversity, the flower abundance, the flower color, etc., as well as what are these other resources for pollinators, such as ground cover, dead wood, certain nesting aids, like we see this bee hotel in the background, or this like rock structure that gardens have put in place. And we also collect environmental data. We also conduct pollination experiments. So many of you may be familiar with this, where we set out plants that we grow in the greenhouse and we put little bags on the flowers, and some of the flowers are then open to pollinators, and we would expect we get these big juicy fruits because the insects can visit them, and we would expect that if they're closed to an insect pollinator, that maybe we get a very small fruit that it doesn't look as delicious and has a less value. But we also engage the gardeners in this activity as well. So we've done a citizen science project where we have the gardeners track the turnover of flower to fruit over time, as well as measure the size of their harvested fruits. And so here we had gardeners do this over the course of 2 summers with their tomatoes, peppers, cucumber, pumpkin, zucchini, and strawberry plants. I won't say too much about the results of this project today, but giving you a taste of the different kinds of ways that we ask questions using both our research in the field as well as and laboratory, as well as with the gardeners as citizen scientists. So here you just see in German that some of the gardeners get really enthusiastic, and they make their own signs for their plants that they're measuring. So it says, I'm a scientist, leave me in peace," and have like numbered it and are taking care of it. Others have documented the photos and made a photo montage of the development of their pepper plant over time. So here's just some visualizations. So what have we found over the past 2 years? Astrid Neumann, who is a PhD candidate in our group, she has documented thousands of flower visiting insect pollinators. So here, just looking at the percentage and total number of observed individuals. Yes, we see a lot of honeybees, but we also have seen a lot of solitary bees, bumblebees, etc. And yeah, all of these are those that yeah, we had, yeah, those that had contact with the floral reproductive organs. And we look at, okay, what are the factors of the gardens that are predicting these different groups? So total pollinator abundance, but also whether we are looking at our wasps or hoverflies or bumblebees, etc. We see that across most of these pollinator groups, that flower richness is a major predictor. And so this is supporting a lot of the literature as well, that flowers are very important, especially in cities, for providing resources for pollinators, especially for organisms like wild bees. And nesting resources, this is also supporting some of the literatures that we see very mixed results based on different taxa. And so here, when we think about conservation interventions around deadwood or bare soil, it may really depend on the target group. So for hoverfly as well as wasp abundance, we see this significant effect. Probably because we have random effects in our models, but there is a lot of variation. And so we see also when we look at these entire communities, so this was done by a postdoc, Aaron Sexton, in our group. When he looked at the entire community of those flower visitors, he saw that, yeah, some of these groups that are dominated or communities that are dominated by bumblebees or hoverflies may be more or less associated with different factors. So like woody tree abundance or richness, vegetation height, or floral richness. But that bare soil may be, yeah, associated with more of these communities that are dominated by others like beetles. And when we look at our bees that we have found, just taking the example of Berlin, we have found over 100 wild bee species, and about 40% of, yeah, these are all are recorded are approximately, these are 40% of all bee species recorded in Berlin, and 25 of these species are also on Berlin's red list. So this is showing that these gardens can be also supporting species of conservation concern. And when we look at some of these traits of the bees that are associated with the garden factors, we see that, yeah, higher landscape imperviousness correlated with more cavity nesting bees, higher amounts of bare ground was correlated with more ground nesting bees, and we also found that higher plant diversity correlated with more pollen specialists, whereas impervious correlated more with generalists. So these are also things that we have seen in the literature. So yeah, increasing amounts of sealed land implies decreasing suitable nesting resources or opportunities, whereas bare ground and sandy or clay soils can provide more colonization opportunities. So a lot of our results that we're finding are supporting what we have seen in other studies and in other urban ecosystems. And we also see that plant diversity, so simply the number of plant species in the gardens, is supporting the number of wild bee species as well as the total number of wild bees. And we also see that if we look at indices of biodiversity, such as the Shannon's index of functional the Shannon's index and functional dispersion, we also see that, yeah, we have positive relationships between the plant diversity and also indices of, yeah, different indices and these indices of wild bee diversity. In our pollination studies, we find that across most of the species that we studied, that simply exposure to pollinators can enhance indicators of pollination in the gardens. So those that were open to the pollinators in here in blue, and those that were closed or bagged in red. We only see that for the case of our strawberries. And yeah, a caveat is that with our strawberry study, we had some difficulties due to snail attacks as well as the some sort of pest on the strawberry plants. And also, we find, not surprisingly, that the factors that may predict the seed mass or the fruit mass or our indicator of pollination largely varied by the plant species that we were looking at. So we find a lot of mixed effects, but generally we are seeing positive effects of pollinator diversity on some of these species. We also find, surprisingly, that floral resources may have negative effects in some cases. Maybe it's because you're increasing the competition of flowers within the garden of these experimental plants. And we also see that landscape imperviousness often has negative effects on pollination, and temperature as well as light availability have positive effects. So, especially I think for chilies or for strawberries, if the temperature in cities is higher, especially in spring or in summer, we may see benefits on at least these indicators of pollination. And so our results show that gardens can host a diversity of wild bee species as well as traits and pollinator groups in general. They're also hosting endangered species, and gardeners can then be, key agents in designing city habitats for bees. So thinking about investing in planting trees and shrubs or planting more flowers, integrating nesting elements, maybe like dead wood or more bare soil, these could all have an influence on the pollinator community, as well as for our wild bees. And so, if we think more about the gardeners and that they can be these key agents in habitat management and potentially in transforming their gardens for pollinators, we also want to know how gardeners were thinking and what would be important factors that influence their behaviors and their what we call pro-pollinator behavior. So here we conducted a survey questionnaire. And sorry, this is in German, but it basically asked whether people agreed on a Likert scale about their knowledge of pollinators, their emotions towards pollinators, their attitudes, so whether they like pollinators in their gardens or not, and also their relationship to nature. And what we found was that emotions had a very strong predictor on people's intentions to act in a pro-pollinator way in gardening and also their actual behavior. And so here our behavior, the proxy that we used was their participation in our pollinator citizen science project. And so many of the people said to be motivated to participate in this project was simply they are interested in learning about pollinators. They have strong educational interests. They want to contribute to nature conservation, and they want to support scientific research. And those that, wanted to get more involved in pollinator conservation, this was largely driven by their emotions, or emotions were a strong predictor here. So those that reported that they were very fascinated in pollinators or felt joy towards pollinators were positive predictors of this behavioral intention to get involved in pollinator conservation, and negative predictors such as anger towards pollinators was a negative predictor. And we conducted this with over 100 gardeners that participated in the citizen science project. So we can maybe harness some of these emotions and also interest generally to participate in nature conservation, to participate in scientific research or support scientific research, to potentially design gardens to support pollinators. And so I showed this picture before of this habitat installation that a garden has already installed. And we see that, these interventions can be also very small. So whether it's just a half meter in size, like a tiny little pond, or a larger sandarium or sandy area, can be different interventions that gardeners can implement. And so what we wanted to then also ask is, okay, can we, based on our research and based on this interest that people have, develop and then eventually evaluate conservation interventions to support pollinators and pollination, together with the gardeners as well as with broader city residents and stakeholders. And so to do this, we entered a transdisciplinary collaboration with several stakeholders and important practice partners in the city of Munich. So here we had, yes, us, and also our colleagues at the Museum of Natural History, where we are doing supporting research, but also several environmental education organizations and urban greening organizations that were developing and implementing the interventions within the city with our guidance. And so right now we've entered the second year of this project, and so I can only share a bit about how far we are. We don't have answers yet, but I am excited to share what we've basically been doing to support the development and evaluation of these interventions. So first, we're simply mapping within the neighborhoods and within the gardens that we are working in. Okay, what are different measures in the gardens already for biodiversity as well as and specifically for pollinators? And we have selected several model neighborhoods to work in, and we have also then developed a catalog of different interventions that people can implement. So whether it's flowering meadows or a nesting resource or nesting aid for pollinators, they come in this catalog, which I'll share a bit about. And then we have also, done a demonstration garden where people can see what are different pollinator conservation measures that they can implement in their gardens or in their backyards or on private property. And we are then also now in the phase where we are supporting gardeners and neighborhood residents to implement these interventions. So basically what this looks like is that, to document the different interventions, we go out and we walk around and systematically check box what have been implemented in the past. So whether it is dry walls or different herbs or different deadwood structures. So here's just an example. Some of these are relatively big, like this dry hedge that has been implemented in a garden. And also these are very small. So this little sand pit that we found in one of the gardens that says, yes, this is a house for insects that want to leave. It is not play sand, so leave it alone. So we find a lot of interesting interventions that gardeners are already doing, as well as neighborhood residents. And so we have now developed this catalog based on our research, also based on literature and practice tips. So here, for example, we found in one of our studies that dead wood is important for wild bees. So we are then developing a suggestion or a document that has a guiding tips for how people can implement these deadwood structures. And we've made like a decision tree so that based on how people or how gardeners or neighborhood residents, whether they have a lot of space or whether they have a big budget or whether they have whether it's in the sun or the shade, etc., that they can follow this decision tree to decide, and sorry, this is in German, they can decide which intervention that they could implement for pollinators. And so we've also conducted workshops around these different interventions to get feedback from gardeners and neighborhood residents. So asking them, okay, what may be potential barriers to this implementation? Do you have any tips for how we can make this easier or more interesting or engage more people, etc.? And right now, we're in the phase where we've now started to implement these different interventions with the gardeners as well as with neighborhood residents. So here, just the gardens, we've conducted initial workshops where they plan out what they need each step. And here you see this catalog where we have examples and the practice tips, and then they write down in this document, in this planning document, what they need each month. And so this happened 2 weeks ago where we worked in one of the gardens to implement a dry wall filled with sand. And so now we're working with our practice partners to expand and move beyond just the garden gate, as I mentioned. So focusing more on the neighborhood scale. So how do we take what we learned from these gardens into the neighborhoods? And so, as I mentioned, we're only working in, or only, but we focused on 4 model neighborhoods in Munich to do this work, based on capacity of what we could do and with the potential to upscale. So we work in these gardens in Munich, and what we've now done is selected 4 surrounding neighborhoods that we will expand to. Oh, I see that I have a question. Maybe I ignore it. Okay, I ignore it for now. Sorry, I forgot about that. Okay, so I've lost my train of thought, but so we are now working with our different practice partners to then work in these 4 model neighborhoods. So each of the practice partners is kind of or is responsible for 2 of the model neighborhoods. And the first thing that we do is we get folks that are interested to participate in these biodiversity and pollinator diversity interventions. And we then define, okay, what is the neighborhood? And so here, this is also, yeah, the neighborhood is like a social feeling. So it's very important to not just rely on landscape or remote sensing data, but to also have people involved in defining their own neighborhoods. We then also do walks. These are led by our practice partners where we map out potential spaces for intervention. So here are just some that were then identified on a neighborhood walk where people see opportunities for adding, for example, flower meadows or a sand structure or stone structures, etc. And then now what we are doing is getting permissions or more folks involved to implement these different interventions. So here's just an example of one of these dry hedges that was implemented last year, and you see that this is actually it's not maybe as pretty as people would like to see in their neighborhoods, and so a lot of these biodiversity interventions may come with acceptance building of conservation interventions, and also communicating the value of such woody structures for biodiversity. We also conducted a balcony project, and this is continuing this year as well. So one of the questions that many neighborhood residents said was, I don't have a garden, I don't have a backyard, but I still would like to do something for pollinators. And so our practice partner started a balcony project where they basically developed a list of different plants based on whether it was a species of conservation concern, whether it was attractive to pollinators, whether it was in the sun or shade, and what kind of soil it required, and then gave these away to different neighborhood residents who want to participate. And then they documented the status of their plants over time. So how it developed, how many flowers it had, is it healthy, etc. And then we also trained them to conduct citizen science observations of the pollinators visiting the flowers on the plants. So we did a training of different pollinator groups, and they then just ticked off each month. So here's the count for May. Okay, I saw one bumblebee, I saw one honeybee, wild bee, etc. on their plants. And we're also supporting this within the 4 neighborhoods here. You'll see here with research that we conduct regularly, where we have research plots across these neighborhoods, where we then also systematically go and do plant and insect observations 3 times a year. And we're also using crowdsourcing data like GBIF or publicly available citizen science databases to collect information about biodiversity at these neighborhood scales. And within these neighborhoods, we also are doing a lot of education and outreach activities. So we are also conducting surveys at the neighborhood scale to ask people's interest, motivation, and intention around insect conservation and citizen science. Again, largely focusing on our pollinators and on wild bees. We are asking neighborhood residents what they see as far as hurdles or challenges to implement insect conservation interventions. And then we are also developing educational modules. And what we see is that we've now created what we call these biodiv hubs or biodiversity hubs that are living laboratories in which we can, conduct these different workshops where we talk about different aspects about pollinator life history or talk about native plants. And we also want these to be spaces where gardeners can communicate, as well as neighborhood residents can communicate what they would like to see change in their neighborhood for biodiversity. And so here are just also some examples that have been implemented in the last months by our praxis partners in these neighborhoods. So we have this show bed of different native plants that has, been used to educate high school students. Like I said, we've also implemented this demonstration garden. It's actually mobile, so it will move around the city of Munich. And here the point is to show, okay, what are different flowers. So here's just a sign that will go with the bed with these raised beds about the different native plants, and that people, everyday passerbys to these demonstration gardens can learn about different flowering plants and the insect pollinators that visit them. I also mentioned that we are using citizen science data, and so we're also now starting bio blitzes and citizen science campaigns within the neighborhoods that we work, so that we can get more people to document biodiversity, and thus we can have more information on how biodiversity may change over time as we are increasingly implementing these different conservation interventions. And this will, continue over the next years. And we're using the platform Ops Identify. Maybe some of you are familiar with it, where you can have like a project. And so, if you're interested in our project BioDiv hubs, you can see how the data based on this neighborhood may change over time. And then we also have a website where we'll be posting the catalog of different interventions. We also have participated with podcasts or just doing workshops, and also doing roundtable discussions with stakeholders with this and practice partners and administration in the city of Munich. So here is this, I mentioned again, sorry, it's in German, the biodiversity strategy of the city of Munich. And what we are really addressing on are a couple of these columns. So whether it's environmental education here, or doing public engagement, or having cooperation with different stakeholder groups, that we are looking to meet some of the goals of the biodiversity strategy of the city. And so to conclude, and give a little outlook about this research. So we do rely very much also on just conducting fundamental research. So right now we are exploring more about the bee and plant traits and how this may then also be affected by different factors in the garden, such as temperature or urbanization, or floral availability, that are, really shaping plant pollinator interactions. We are also conducting continuously different workshops in the gardens that we work in, as well as in the neighborhoods. And now we are implementing these conservation interventions in Munich with the hope that also in the next couple of years we'll move and scale this up to Berlin as well, and have both of our two cities as flagship projects for our work. We are also consistently conducting roundtables with city officials, and we are also trying to align our work with the biodiversity strategy of the city. So with that, I will say thank you to our practice partners, to our collaborators, all of the field teams at the Technical University of Munich, at the Museum of Natural History in Berlin, and also at the Technical University of Berlin, where I was as a postdoc and where we started this work. I also want to thank the gardeners and the neighborhood residents for allowing us to work in their spaces, and also our research group at TUM. And so with that, I will say thank you. And I hope that, we have some time and for questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Monika, for a great talk. I can manage the Q&A. So yeah, if you do have questions from
Yeah.
the audience, go ahead and write into the Q&A. And we have a couple here. So the first one, Susan was asking if there's any chance that you could share the document of potential interventions, or if it's available in English somewhere? I guess the ones that you're adopting in the neighborhoods in Munich.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Right now it is all in German, but I think that once we have and scientific illustrator is making the final version of it, but then the possibility for it to be translated to English is certainly the case. It may just come a bit later this year than what we're hoping to release the first version, the published version, by the end of April. So maybe the English version will come a bit later than that. Yeah.
Is that something that will be on your website, or how
So
are you
this
planning on sort of putting that out?
Yeah, so this would be on our BioDev Hub's website as well as on our lab website. So the also the yeah, so it'll be probably a couple places. The project website, the lab website at the hosted at the TUM, and then also the TU Munich has a publication service. So this will also be like searchable on Google Scholar or because it will have a DOI and folks could find it that way. But maybe by the time, at least at this webinar is released, we would have the German version for sure. And so folks could at least have see the German version and use like Google Translate or something to get some tips on interventions that they might be interested in. And in the meantime, yeah, I'll work on the English version.
Great, thanks. Amy is asking what trends you've noticed in terms of the impact of honeybee hives on wild bee diversity. Maybe you can comment more generally on honeybee. It's a sort of different situation in Germany where honeybees are, I suppose, somewhat more native, even if they're still managed.
Yeah, so we have often used in our models, like looked at if honeybee is a predictor of wild bees or if play a strong role in shaping our results in some way. And I mean, we are collecting also information on the hives that are within the vicinity. I don't think that we have found a strong influence of that on the bee community. Also did not find this in Berlin about that the number of honeybees was, a predictor of wild bee diversity. We didn't necessarily design our study that way. So I think that this is one of the challenges with like asking this question about honeybee competition or negative impacts of honeybees on wild bees, is that often the data might not necessarily be collected in a way that could answer that question. So it may just be, okay, what species are, co-occurrence or correlation, but you can't necessarily say anything about negative or positive impacts per se, or probably negative impacts. Um, we do. We have now done a review of looking at the impacts of honeybees, or I guess I should put it another way. Let me restart. So, a postdoc in our group, Joan Castaneda Abea, is very interested in this question of the dominance of honeybees in wild bee, bee. I should just say bee, urban bee studies, and has found that I think honeybees are, in some cases, dominant in the studies in the urban bee studies. So I would say, I don't have the data now on me, but that we see that they are a majority, can be a majority of the population. So maybe I leave it at that, and move to the question that also maybe Amy, I answer your question about Ops Identify. So why did we choose Ops Identify for our community science efforts over other observation apps like iNaturalist? We did this because Ops Identify you can also do, I think that it's better, or we had the experience that it was better with also plant and insect identification. So some of the challenges with other apps is that they may just be for plants, or they focus just on plants or just on a pollinator, and here we could have both. And also, we had the option to create these projects. So this was really nice for us. And iNaturalist I think maybe you can also do these projects, but the Ops Identify was just a very nice platform for us to use, and it's European based. So this is why we decided to work with them. Yeah. But I think that it's all contributing to GBIF data.
Great. Yeah, I'll say, I think a lot of it is regional based. Like I think a naturalist, my census just doesn't have as much buy-in in Europe as some of these other like hubs identify.
Yeah, I don't know why, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, Great, thank you. So Bonnie was interested to hear a bit more about the sand beds
Yeah.
for the ground nesting bees as an intervention, or how you make them.
Yeah, so these are very different. It really also depends on maybe which bees you want to support, or ground nesting bees or ground nesting insects you want to support. So we have like different suggestions about this is yeah, either it gets combined with some sort of like drywall, like the stone wall that I showed before. Or you could think about maybe creating more a bit of typography because some bees may like the elevation or want to have these more steeper or slopes. And I think one of the issues around, or not issues, but one of the key recommendations for the sand beds is, yeah, not to plant them as much. So you can integrate a bit of plants as well as them, but to also have good sand structure and to not have it be too coarse or potentially, yeah, that it may have be washed with some sort of chemical that may inhibit nesting or attractiveness of the sand bed. So these are just some key points is that the structure of the sand is very important. The composition of the sand is important. Usually they say if you like have a bucket of the sand and you then dump it down and if you could stick your finger in it or a pencil, it shouldn't crumble already. So these are just like some like practical tips. And yeah, not to have it be too coarse because this may damage the wings of the bees or may not be yeah suitable for nesting. So those are just some tips. I think also that they should be like 50 or 60 centimeters in depth, these sand beds. I'm trying to think about, yeah, the range, but I think it's, yeah, greater than 50 centimeters. And also, yeah, maybe the last tip, sorry, is that over time with rain or weather and erosion, you may need to then add also more sand or more material. So it's also just good to monitor it over time.
Excellent. Beatrice is asking a question about those sentinel plants that you're using to assess pollinator dependence. Are you growing those yourselves or purchasing plants from retail outlets? And specifically, I think she's interested in uh, the potential effect of pesticide residues if you're purchasing plants.
Yeah, so for these sentinel plants, also for the balcony project that we did, we are using plants that we grow ourselves. So we buy the seed and we grow them in the greenhouse at the university or at a local nursery. So the only, yeah, we have lost many plants in the greenhouse because we chose not to use, yeah, some sort of insecticide or, yeah, some sort of chemical material to defend them against pests. So even when we had then pest outbreaks in the greenhouse, that in some section of the greenhouse where we lost some of the plants, we chose not to spray them with material that then may affect the pollination experiment. So they were not grown with pesticides. Whether we can completely guarantee that in some way pesticide drift didn't come from somewhere, I guess I can't say that per se, but they were grown in greenhouse conditions. At least for a majority of their life, and then returned to the greenhouse after they were in the gardens.
Great. So Audrey has
Yeah,
some,
maybe I should read this. Okay.
I think I can summarize it. She's appreciative of the work and particularly interested in this interdisciplinary aspect of your research, but also has noticed that there's sort of a bias towards research in urban pollination ecology more generally, I would say, towards the global north with less focus on cities in the global south. And so, well, yeah, what's your thought on that? And are there ways that you're trying to work across that divide?
Yeah. Thank you for this question, Audrey. I think this is, yeah, always important. I often get this because, yeah, I would say many of the citizen scientists or the folks that are interested in doing this kind of work are like folks that are retired or are women. And so there is like a bias, yes, in who is conducting citizen science activities, and often that there is this global north bias. So I would just agree with you there. And what can we do? Um, I think, yeah, I'm always then open to collaboration. So, and exchange. So, hosting PhD students in our group. So, we'll have an incoming PhD visiting from Brazil who does urban pollinator work and thinking about with her about how she could develop a citizen science project or conduct more social ecological research around pollinators or around bees, and that she could, yeah, do back in Brazil. And so these are just maybe some ways is like through student engagement, and we have many international students joining our group, but also then applying for, yeah, international funding streams, whether this is like the EU Horizons call or Biodiversa call that's very European based, but is now expanding to other countries. So, yeah, I think it's tricky because I also don't want to then go somewhere else and say, okay, we should do this and this and this in this place that I don't, yeah, I am also an outsider too. But I certainly think that yes, we need to support this kind of work across the world, and especially in places that have been underfunded or under researched, like many places in the global south. So yeah, I don't necessarily have the best answer for you. But yeah, being open to international collaboration and yeah, I think whether this is through through international exchange, but also conferences, etc., to yeah bridge this growing gap.
Great, thank you. Maybe I had a question I wanted to throw in, sort of related to this. You talked about in your survey how emotional valence towards pollinators is a big determinant of behavior, and I guess I'm curious if you have thoughts about what drives those positive emotions as sort of an upstream way to get people more engaged with pro-pollinator activity. And I think specifically now you have this interesting sort of comparative perspective from Munich to Berlin to California. If there are similarities or differences that you see in the groups of people who are gardening and particularly engaged in pollinator conservation in those spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is also a very interesting, tricky question because I think it comes a lot with what are people's backgrounds, whether they come from rural or urban places, how have they been exposed to nature in the past. So it's a lot of their own histories that may influence their emotions or their emotional response to insects. So today, so I mean, we are also doing a another project on outdoor education, where teachers are taking kids out to outdoor classrooms, and I think yeah, the teachers were telling us that yeah, in some of the classrooms you have yeah that many of the students are fine with going outside with the animals that they're exposed to, the ants on the ground, bugs, whatever, but that some of the students that are coming from multicultural backgrounds or coming from immigrant families, that this is like one of the scariest days for them, and that they're not used to going, that they don't, yeah, they're not used to maybe playing outside or to being exposed to ants, and that this triggers a fear. So I think that through education early on or exposure early on, that this is may be a way to like combat this. There's also this trend of like the extinction of experience. that environmental psychologists use for the lack of exposure to nature that kids increasingly have these days. So we spend how many hours? 6 hours a day is like the average scrolling time of a contemporary teenager. And how many hours a day do they spend outside? So I think that these are issues that then they have long-term or they may have long-term impacts down the line on how on our emotional response to elements of nature or facets of nature, and then our willingness to care. So I don't think that, I think that this is across society that we are seeing this, I guess, this loss of connection to nature, and that, those that may have more exposure early on, develop a relationship to nature, are more willing to care for nature and its diverse elements. But those that may not be, and this may, also be very much correlated to socioeconomic status, may, lose this connection, or not build this connection to nature, and this may have then implications for their emotions towards pollinators, whether it's bees, wasps, beetles, ants, whatever organism it may be.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for those insights. I think I don't see any more questions, so I guess with that we can, thank you so much for a really fascinating seminar. I don't know, Catherine, do you want to say
Yeah, I'm
anything
just
more?
going to end it off with a little reminder. Thank you so much, Monica, for the talk. It was really fascinating. And before everyone leaves, I'm just going to post a reminder for our last talk next month with Dr. Matthias Becker. It is on April 13th at 11 a.m. It's a Friday. So if you haven't already, you can visit the website to register for his talk. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today for the BEEc Speaker Series.